Andre Taylor couldn't believe this was happening. Just 2 hours ago, he had been sitting in the library, finishing his history paper on the civil rights movement. Now he was in the back of a police car, his wrists uncomfortably tight in metal handcuffs, trying to make sense of how his ordinary Tuesday had turned into this nightmare. "I wasn't even there," Andre said for what felt like the 100th time. The officer in the passenger seat didn't bother turning around. Andre was 17, tall for his age with warm brown eyes that his grandmother always said were too serious for someone so young. He wore his hair in short, neat twists, and today he had on his favorite navy hoodie, the one with his school's debate team logo on the back. He'd been wearing it proudly since they'd qualified for nationals last month. The police car pulled into the station, a squat brick building that Andre had passed countless times but never imagined entering like this. His heart hammered against his ribs as the officers led him through a side entrance, away from the main lobby where normal people walked in to report stolen bikes or fender benders. "Can I call my mom now?" Andre asked as they walked him down a hallway with buzzing fluorescent lights. "You'll get your phone call," the taller officer said, not unkindly, but with the practiced tone of someone who had said those exact words hundreds of times before. They took his fingerprints, his shoelaces, his belt. Each item placed in a plastic bin felt like another piece of his normal life being stripped away. The booking officer asked questions in a bored voice, typing Andre's answers into an ancient-looking computer. "Address? 728 Oakwood Avenue. That's in the Highland Park area, right? Nice neighborhood," Andre nodded. His mom had worked 2 jobs for 5 years to afford that house in the better school district. She always said education was the one thing nobody could take from you. The irony wasn't lost on him as he stood there missing his advanced placement chemistry test. "What happened?" Andre finally asked when there was a lull in the questioning. "Why am I here?" The booking officer glanced up. "Armed robbery at the mini-mart on Westfield. Happened about an hour ago. Witness description matches you." Andre felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. "Armed robbery? I was at the library." "Check with Miss Powell, the librarian. She saw me working on my paper. I was there until you guys picked me up." The officer shrugged. "Tell it to the detective." They put him in a small room with a metal table bolted to the floor and 2 uncomfortable chairs. One wall had a large mirror that Andre knew from every police show was actually a window for people to watch from the other side. He sat there for what felt like hours, his thoughts racing between fear, confusion, and anger. The door finally opened and a man in a rumpled suit walked in, carrying a thin folder and a cup of coffee that smelled better than anything should in a place like this. "Andre Taylor," the man said, setting down his coffee and opening the folder. "I'm Detective Walsh. Want to tell me what happened today?" "I was at the library," Andre said, leaning forward. "I have a history paper due Friday, and I was using the reference books they don't let you check out. I was there from right after school, around 3:30, until your officers grabbed me walking home around 6:15. Detective Walsh made a note. "The robbery happened at 5:47. Witness says a young black male in a dark hoodie about your height pulled a gun on the cashier and took off with about $300 in cash. That wasn't me," Andre said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Check the library security cameras. Talk to the librarian, Ms. Powell. She knows me. I'm there all the time." "We'll look into it," Walsh said, but his tone suggested he wasn't convinced. "Any reason why you'd need money, Andre?" "College applications coming up, right? Those fees add up." Andre stared at him in disbelief. "I'm on the debate team. I have a 4.2 GPA. I've never been in trouble in my life. Why would I throw all that away for $300? Walsh shrugged. "People make bad decisions every day." "I want to call my mom now," Andre said firmly. "Soon," Walsh replied, flipping through his notes. "Tell me about your route home from the library. Did you pass by the mini-mart?" Andre took a deep breath. His debate coach had taught him that when emotions ran high, the clearest, most logical response was usually best. "No, the library is on Elm Street. I was walking east on Maple, which is 2 blocks north of Westfield where the mini-mart is. I never went anywhere near it." Walsh made another note. "What about friends? Anyone who might have borrowed your hoodie recently?" "No," Andre said, frustration building. "Look, this is crazy. I didn't rob anyone. I've never even held a gun." "You've got the wrong person." "Then you've got nothing to worry about," Walsh said, standing up. "Sit tight." The door closed behind him with a heavy click. Andre put his head in his hands, trying to process what was happening. His mom would be worried sick by now. She always expected him home by 7 on school nights, and it was well past that. His phone had been taken during booking, sealed away in that same plastic bin with his belt and shoelaces, like pieces of a normal life just out of reach. Another hour crawled by. Andre tried to remember everything he knew about wrongful arrests from his constitutional law elective. He had rights. They couldn't just hold him without evidence. But knowing this did little to calm the knot of fear in his stomach. When the door opened again, it wasn't Detective Walsh but a younger officer, who took him to a different room with a phone on the wall. "You get one call," the officer said. "Make it count." Andre's fingers trembled as he dialed his home number. The phone rang 4 times, each ring stretching into eternity, before his mother's worried voice answered. "Hello? Mom," Andre said, his voice cracking despite his best efforts. "I'm at the police station. They're saying I robbed a store, but I didn't do it. I was at the library the whole time." There was a moment of silence, and then his mother's voice came back, steely with a calm that Andre recognized. It was the same tone she used when dealing with difficult situations at work, a voice that said she was already 3 steps ahead in solving the problem. "Which station?" "Downtown, I think." "The main one. Don't say anything else to anyone. I'm on my way." There was a pause. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm okay, just scared." "Listen to me, Andre, you've done nothing wrong. Hold your head high. I'll be there soon." The line went dead and the officer led Andre back to the holding cell. This one had other people in it. A man sleeping on a bench in the corner, another pacing back and forth, muttering to himself. Andre found a spot on the opposite bench and sat down, trying to make himself as small as possible. What the police didn't know, what no one in this station knew, was exactly who Andre's mother was. Denise Taylor wasn't just any worried parent coming to check on her son. For the past 8 months, she had served as the United States Attorney General, appointed after a distinguished career as a federal prosecutor and judge. Andre and his mom had agreed to keep a low profile about her position, especially at his school. He wanted to be known for his own accomplishments, not his mother's high-profile job. But now, as Andre sat in that cold cell, he wondered if he'd been naive. He'd believed that the system worked the same for everyone, that innocence was protection enough. The debate team had recently argued a case about implicit bias in the justice system, and he'd researched the statistics on how young black men were disproportionately targeted, but it had all seemed academic then. Now those statistics had a face, his face. Time crawled by. The man in the corner snored loudly. Someone down the hall was shouting. Andre tried to focus on his breathing, on staying calm, on trusting that this would all get sorted out. His mom would know what to do. She always did. Finally, heavy footsteps approached. A different officer appeared at the cell door. "Taylor," he called, unlocking the door. "Let's go." Andre stood up, legs stiff from sitting too long. "Where are we going?" The officer didn't answer, just gestured for him to follow. They walked down another hallway, this one carpeted and quieter than the others. Andre was led into a small conference room, where Detective Walsh sat at a table, looking considerably less relaxed than before, and there, standing by the window with her back straight and her eyes fierce with protective fury, was his mother. Andre had never been so happy to see anyone in his life. Denise Taylor wore a tailored charcoal suit, her usual work attire with a small American flag pin on her lapel, the only visible sign of her government position. She crossed the room in 3 quick steps and wrapped her arms around him. "Are you all right?" she whispered. Andre nodded against her shoulder. "I'm okay." She pulled back, examining his face as if checking for injuries, then turned toward Detective Walsh. The change in her demeanor was subtle but unmistakable. This wasn't just his mom anymore. This was the nation's top law enforcement officer, and she was not pleased. "Detective," she said, her voice deceptively pleasant, "I believe we have some things to discuss about my son." Detective Walsh shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The atmosphere in the small conference room had changed dramatically since Denise Taylor had walked in. Her presence filled the space with an unmistakable authority that had nothing to do with her government position and everything to do with a mother protecting her child. "Mrs. Taylor," Walsh began, "we're following standard procedure here. A witness identified someone matching your son's description." "Did this witness actually see my son's face?" Denise interrupted, her voice calm but firm. Or was it just a young black male in a hoodie? Walsh glanced down at his notes. The witness statement mentions a dark blue hoodie and, "Do you know how many young men wear dark hoodies in this city?" Denise asked. "Thousands. That's not identification, detective. That's profiling." Andre sat quietly beside his mother, watching her work. This was the side of her he rarely saw. The skilled attorney who had risen through the ranks of the Justice Department long before her appointment as Attorney General. In their home, she was just Mom, the woman who made terrible pancakes on Sunday mornings and fell asleep watching old movies with him on the couch. Andre was at the public library during the robbery, Denise continued. He was working on a history paper. There are security cameras, staff who know him, and probably a computer log of his library card being used. "Have you checked any of that?" Walsh's expression tightened. "We're gathering evidence." "No," Denise said. "You decided my son was guilty the moment he matched a vague description, and now you're trying to build a case around him instead of finding the actual perpetrator." She placed a hand on Andre's shoulder. "I want him released immediately. Unless you have actual evidence linking him specifically to this crime." The detective hesitated, then closed his folder. "We can release him to your custody while we continue the investigation." "That's not what I asked," Denise said. "Do you have evidence?" "Not a vague description, not proximity, not hunches, actual evidence?" "Not at this time," Walsh admitted reluctantly. Denise nodded. "Then we're leaving." "And detective, I expect every piece of exonerating evidence, the library security footage, the staff statements, everything, to be thoroughly examined." She stood up, her height accentuated by her low heels. "You have my number. Please use it when you've cleared my son's name." Andre felt a surge of pride watching his mother handle the situation with such composure. She hadn't once mentioned her position, hadn't thrown her weight around or made threats. She had simply demanded the same fair treatment that anyone deserved. 20 minutes later, after signing some paperwork and collecting his belongings, Andre walked out of the police station with his mother beside him. The night air felt sweet after hours in the stale, recycled atmosphere inside. For a moment, they just stood there breathing. "You okay?" Denise asked, looking at him with concern. Andre nodded. "Yeah, thanks for coming so fast." "As if I wouldn't." She squeezed his shoulder. "Let's go home. We can talk there." The drive home was quiet. Andre stared out the window, watching the familiar streets of their city slide by. The experience at the police station had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. He kept thinking about what might have happened if his mother wasn't who she was, if she didn't understand the system, didn't know what questions to ask, what rights to insist upon. "It's not over," Denise said as they pulled into their driveway. "They'll still investigate, but at least you're home." Their house was modest compared to what someone in Denise's position could afford, but she had chosen it for the school district and the diverse neighborhood. It was a 2-story colonial with a small front yard and a basketball hoop in the driveway that Andre had long outgrown, but couldn't bear to take down. It represented normalcy, something that felt suddenly precious. Inside, Denise kicked off her shoes and headed for the kitchen. Hungry? Andre realized he was starving. He hadn't eaten since lunch. Definitely. While his mother reheated leftover pasta, Andre sat at the kitchen island and finally told her the whole story. The library, his walk home, the sudden appearance of the police car, everything that had happened at the station before she arrived. Denise listened without interrupting, her face growing more troubled as he described the questioning, the assumptions, the dismissal of his alibi. When he finished, she slid a plate of pasta in front of him and leaned against the counter. "I'm sorry you went through that," she said simply. Andre twirled pasta around his fork. Is this what you deal with every day, at work?" Denise considered her answer carefully. "What I deal with is a system that's supposed to deliver justice but doesn't always get it right. Sometimes because of honest mistakes and sometimes because of deeper problems. Bias, prejudice, laziness." She sighed. "We're trying to fix it, but it's slow work." "They just saw a black kid in a hoodie," Andre said quietly. "Yes," Denise admitted. "But we're going to make sure they see the truth now." After dinner, exhaustion hit Andre like a wave. The adrenaline that had kept him alert in the police station had drained away, leaving him bone-tired. He trudged upstairs to his bedroom, falling asleep almost as soon as his head hit the pillow. The next morning brought a new challenge. Andre's preliminary hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. at the courthouse downtown. Denise had made some calls and arranged for a family friend who was a defense attorney to represent Andre, though she assured him it was just a formality. With his alibi and the lack of evidence, the case would likely be dismissed. "Do I have to miss school?" Andre asked over breakfast. Part of him wanted to get back to normal as quickly as possible, to pretend none of this had happened. "Just today," Denise said. "I think it's important for you to be there to see how the process works." She paused. "And to see it end." They arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early. The building was imposing, all marble columns and wide steps leading to heavy bronze doors. Inside, people moved with purpose through metal detectors and down long hallways. Lawyers in suits carried briefcases and talked in hushed tones with their clients. Court officers directed traffic, their uniforms crisp and authoritative. Andre and Denise met their attorney, Paul Chen, in the lobby. He was a sharp-dressed man in his 40s who had known Denise since law school. "This should be straightforward," Paul assured them, reviewing his notes. "The case is weak, and I've already filed a motion to dismiss based on the alibi evidence. Judge Harmon is presiding, though, so be prepared." "Harmon," Denise frowned. "Harold Harmon?" Paul nodded. "You know him?" "By reputation," Denise said carefully. "He's traditional." What she didn't say, what Andre could read in her expression, was that Judge Harmon had a reputation for being harsh, particularly with young defendants of color. Andre had heard his mother mention the judge before. In late-night phone calls she thought he couldn't hear. Discussions about judicial review and patterns of sentencing disparity. Courtroom 3B was smaller than Andre had imagined. There were only a few rows of benches for spectators, a gate separating them from the tables where lawyers sat, and the judge's bench raised on a platform at the front. The American flag stood to one side, the state flag to the other. Everything was wood and brass in somber colors. Other cases were called before Andre's. He watched nervously as defendants approached with their attorneys, some looking confident, others terrified. Most were adults, but a few seemed barely older than him. The proceedings moved quickly. Charges read, pleas entered, bail set or denied. Next dates assigned. "Commonwealth versus Andre Taylor," the court officer finally called. Andre rose on shaky legs and followed Paul to the defense table. His mother sat directly behind them in the first row of spectators. Judge Harmon peered down at them from his bench, his face impassive behind wire-rimmed glasses. He was an older white man with thinning gray hair and deep lines around his mouth that suggested he frowned more often than he smiled. "Charges of armed robbery," the clerk read. "How does the defendant plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor," Paul said firmly. "And we move to dismiss all charges based on the complete lack of evidence and a solid alibi. Mr. Taylor was at the public library at the time of the robbery, which can be verified by security footage and witnesses." The prosecutor, a young woman with a severe ponytail, stood. "Your Honor, the investigation is ongoing. We request the defendant be remanded pending further evidence gathering." Paul looked incredulous. "Remanded? For a first-time offense that he didn't commit? My client is a high school student with perfect attendance and a 4.2 GPA. He has strong community ties and is not a flight risk." Judge Harmon studied the papers before him, his expression giving nothing away. When he looked up, his gaze fell not on Paul or the prosecutor, but directly on Andre. "Bail is set at $50,000, he announced. Andre felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. $50,000? For something he didn't do? Paul immediately protested. "Your Honor, that's excessive for a first-time defendant, especially one with such strong community ties." "The nature of the alleged crime involves a weapon," Judge Harmon said coldly. "I consider that a public safety concern." "But there's no evidence connecting my client to the crime," Paul argued. "The witness provided only a vague description that could match thousands of young men in this city." Judge Harmon's expression hardened. "My ruling stands, Counselor. Next case." As they were led away from the defense table, Andre whispered to Paul, "What does this mean?" Paul looked grim. "It means the judge is making this difficult. We can post bail, but—" He glanced at Denise, whose face had gone completely expressionless, a sign Andre knew that she was furious. "This isn't right," Andre said, his voice low but intense. "He didn't even look at the evidence." "No," Denise agreed quietly. "He didn't, and we need to find out why." The bail bondsman's office smelled of old coffee and cheaper cologne. Andre sat in a plastic chair while his mother and Paul handled the paperwork. $50,000 meant they needed to put up $5,000 in cash. Money that would be returned if Andre showed up for all his court dates, but still a substantial amount to produce on short notice. "This is ridiculous," Denise muttered as she wrote out a check. "Completely disproportionate to the alleged offense, especially given the lack of evidence." Paul nodded grimly. Harmon's bail decisions have been challenged before, but they rarely get overturned. He knows exactly how far he can push without crossing the line into something an appeals court would slap down. Andre stared at his hands. He had been silent since leaving the courtroom, trying to process what was happening. Yesterday he had been a normal high school student. Today he was posting bail for a crime he didn't commit, with a judge who seemed determined to treat him like a hardened criminal. "Why is he doing this?" Andre finally asked. "He doesn't even know me." Paul and Denise exchanged a look, one of those adult communications that didn't need words. "Judge Harmon has a particular view of justice," Paul said carefully. "Some judges believe in rehabilitation, some in deterrence, some in protecting society. Harmon believes in what he calls moral correction. He sees himself as teaching lessons." "But I didn't do anything wrong," Andre protested. "I know," Paul said, his voice softening, "and we're going to prove that. But it might take some time." Time was exactly what worried Andre. His college applications were due in 3 months. His debate team had nationals coming up. His entire future seemed to be hanging by a thread, all because he happened to match a vague description and cross paths with a judge who had already decided he was guilty. The bail process took another 2 hours. By the time they left, the late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the street. Andre felt drained, as if he had run a marathon. "You should eat something," Denise said as they walked to the car. "Then we need to talk strategy." Andre wasn't hungry, but he knew better than to argue when his mother used that tone. They stopped at a diner on the way home, a place they had been going to since Andre was small enough to need the booster seat. The familiar smell of grilled onions and fresh bread was comforting, a small piece of normal in a day that had been anything but. Over burgers and fries, Paul laid out their options. "We can fight this the standard way. Gather evidence, prepare for trial, focus on reasonable doubt, or—" He glanced at Denise. "Or?" Andre prompted. Denise put down her coffee cup. "Or we can dig deeper into Judge Harmon's record. Look for patterns, see if there's a bigger issue at play." She looked directly at Andre. "But I need you to understand what that means. It would turn this from your case into something much larger, with more attention, more scrutiny." Andre understood what she wasn't saying. Until now, they had kept her position as Attorney General separate from his life as much as possible. She had come to his court appearance as his mother, not as a government official. Looking into Harmon would blur that line. "What would you do if I wasn't your son?" Andre asked. "If this was just another case that came across your desk?" Denise didn't hesitate. "I'd investigate. If a judge is showing bias in one case, he's likely doing it in others. That's a systemic issue that affects public trust in the justice system." Andre nodded slowly. "Then that's what we should do." Paul pulled out his laptop. "I can start pulling Harmon's case history tonight. Look at sentencing patterns, bail decisions, case outcomes. I know someone at the public defender's office who might have insights," Denise added. "They see the day-to-day reality of his courtroom." Andre watched them work, feeling simultaneously grateful for their expertise and frustrated by his own helplessness. This was his life, his future, but suddenly he seemed to have the least control over what happened next. "What about me?" he asked. "What can I do?" Denise looked up from her notes. "You focus on school. Keep your grades up, stay out of trouble, be exactly the outstanding student we know you are. The best defense against what's happening is to be undeniably the person we know you to be." It wasn't the answer Andre wanted, but he nodded anyway. He understood the strategy. They needed to contrast Judge Harmon's assumptions with the reality of who Andre was. Still, it felt like sitting on the sidelines while others fought his battle. That night, sleep eluded Andre. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the hearing in his mind. The judge had barely looked at him, had made his decision without seemingly considering any of the facts. Was it just his hoodie? His skin color? The neighborhood where he was arrested? He reached for his phone to check the time. 2:17 a.m. A text message notification showed on his screen. It was from his friend Damon. Heard what happened. You okay? Call me. News traveled fast in high school. By tomorrow, everyone would know. Andre put the phone down without responding. What could he even say? I'm fine, just being framed for armed robbery. The next morning, Andre's mother drove him to school. The ride was quiet, both lost in their own thoughts until Denise broke the silence. You don't have to go today, she said. We could take another day, let things settle. Andre shook his head. You said to be the student we know I am. That means going to school even when it's hard. Denise smiled, a mix of pride and concern on her face. Call me if you need anything, anytime. Walking into school felt like stepping onto a stage. Conversations paused as he passed, eyes followed him down the hallway. Some looks were curious, others sympathetic, a few wary. News had indeed traveled fast. His first class was AP Chemistry. The test he had missed was waiting on his desk. A note from Mr. Bryant attached. See me after class to schedule makeup. At least some things still followed normal rules. Damon caught up with him between classes, falling into step beside him. Dude, what happened? There's all kinds of crazy rumors going around. Andre glanced around at the crowded hallway. Not here. Lunch, maybe. The morning dragged on. Andre tried to focus on his classes, but his mind kept drifting back to the courthouse, to Judge Harmon's cold stare, to the uncertainty hanging over his future. In English, they were discussing The Scarlet Letter. The irony of studying a book about public shame while feeling the weight of suspicious glances wasn't lost on him. By lunchtime, Andre had decided what to tell his friends. As he sat down at their usual table, Damon, Tyler, and Keisha all looked at him expectantly. I was arrested for something I didn't do, Andre said simply. I was at the library when a store was robbed. The police picked me up because I matched a vague description. We had a hearing yesterday and now we're fighting to clear my name. That's messed up, Tyler said, shaking his head. My cousin went through something similar, Keisha added. Took months to sort out. Months? Andre couldn't keep the dismay from his voice. My dad knows a good lawyer, Damon offered. If you need one, we've got that covered, Andre said, thinking of Paul and his mother. But thanks. The conversation shifted to other topics. The upcoming basketball game, college application deadlines, the chemistry test. His friends were trying to give him normalcy, and Andre appreciated it more than they could know. After school, Andre had debate team practice. Their faculty advisor, Ms. Rivera, pulled him aside before they started. I heard what happened, she said. If you need time off, I understand, Andre shook his head. I need this, actually. Something normal. Ms. Rivera studied him for a moment, then nodded. Okay, we're working on cross-examination techniques today. Right up your alley. The irony made Andre smile despite everything. When he got home, Andre found his mother and Paul in the dining room, surrounded by stacks of papers and open laptops. They had been working all day from the looks of it. How was school? Denise asked, looking up from her computer. Weird, Andre admitted. But okay. What's all this? Paul gestured to the papers spread across the table. Judge Harmon's case history for the past 5 years. We're seeing some interesting patterns. Andre dropped his backpack and pulled up a chair. Like what? Disproportionate sentencing, Denise said, pointing to a spreadsheet. Particularly for young men of color. Higher bail amounts, longer sentences, fewer diversionary programs. The differences are subtle enough that they haven't triggered formal review, Paul added. But when you aggregate the data, the pattern becomes clear. Andre picked up one of the papers, a printout of case summaries. The details varied, but the outcomes seemed depressingly similar to his own experience. Young men, often first-time offenders, receiving harsh treatment from Judge Harmon. There's more, Denise said, her voice taking on the measured tone she used when discussing difficult topics. We found a connection between Harmon and a private juvenile detention center called Westbrook Academy. What kind of connection? Andre asked. Financial, Paul said grimly. He sits on the board of a foundation that invests heavily in the company that runs Westbrook. And guess where a disproportionate number of his young defendants end up being sent? Andre felt a chill. Westbrook, Denise nodded. It's not technically illegal. The financial connection is through layers of corporations and foundations. But it's a clear conflict of interest that should have been disclosed. So what does this mean for me? Andre asked, the reality of his situation hitting him anew. Denise closed her laptop and looked directly at him. It means we have leverage, but also that we're dealing with someone who has a vested interest in putting young men like you into the system, rather than keeping them out. She took a deep breath. It also means we need to be very careful about our next steps. Andre looked from his mother to Paul, understanding dawning slowly. You think he'd really try to send me there, even though I didn't do anything? Neither adult contradicted him, which was answer enough. The silence in the room felt heavy with unspoken possibilities. So what do we do? Andre finally asked. Denise's expression shifted, determination replacing concern. We fight. But not just for you. For every kid who's faced this judge without having an attorney general for a mother. It was the first time she had explicitly referenced her position in relation to his case. The line had been crossed. This wasn't just about Andre anymore. It was about something much bigger, and somehow, that made the weight on his shoulders feel both heavier and easier to bear. 3 days had passed since the hearing, and Andre's life had settled into an uncomfortable new routine. School during the day where he tried to act normal despite the whispers and stares. Afternoons spent with his mother and Paul, reviewing case files and building their defense. Nights lying awake, wondering how his life had spun so dramatically off course. The library security footage had finally been obtained, clearly showing Andre at a study table during the time of the robbery. The librarian, Ms. Powell, had provided a written statement confirming his presence. The convenience store's cameras had captured grainy footage of the actual robber, similar build to Andre, but with distinctive features that should have ruled Andre out immediately, if the police had bothered to look closely. Yet despite this mounting evidence of his innocence, the prosecutor wasn't dropping the charges. Their next court date was still a week away, and the uncertainty was eating at Andre. I don't understand, he said during dinner that evening. We have proof I didn't do it. Why are they still pushing this? Denise set down her fork. Because admitting they made a mistake means admitting the system failed. And because Judge Harmon isn't looking for justice, he's looking for convictions. Andre pushed his food around his plate. So what happens next? We just wait for the hearing and hope he suddenly starts caring about evidence? Not exactly, Paul said, exchanging a glance with Denise. We've been working on something. Denise reached for a folder beside her plate. She had taken to keeping case documents everywhere lately, even at the dinner table. We found 7 other cases in the past year alone where Judge Harmon sent young defendants to Westbrook on questionable grounds. All of them share certain characteristics with your case. You mean they're all black kids? Andre asked bluntly. Yes, Denise admitted. All black or Latino, all first-time offenders, all from certain neighborhoods, and all with evidence that was less than compelling. And the connection to Westbrook? How does that work exactly? Paul took over. Harmon sits on the board of the Fairview Foundation, which is a major investor in Pinnacle Youth Services, the company that runs Westbrook and 5 other juvenile facilities across the state. Every kid sent there means more money for Pinnacle. That's just wrong, Andre said, the implications sinking in. It's like he's selling kids. It's a conflict of interest, at minimum, Denise agreed. The problem is proving that his rulings are influenced by the financial connection. Judges have a lot of discretion in sentencing. Andre thought for a moment. So what's our plan? I mean, we can prove I'm innocent, but what about the bigger issue? What about the other kids? That's where things get complicated, Denise said. As your mother, my only concern is clearing your name and keeping you out of that place. But as Attorney General, you have a responsibility to address corruption in the system, Andre finished for her. Denise nodded. Exactly. And that's where you need to make a choice, Andre. We can fight your case narrowly, focus on the evidence of your innocence and leave the larger issues for another day. Or we can take on the whole corrupt arrangement, which might help others but would put you in the spotlight. Andre didn't need to think about it for long. You always taught me that standing up for what's right matters even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. He straightened in his chair. If other kids are going through this without someone like you fighting for them, then we need to do something. Pride shone in Denise's eyes. I was hoping you'd say that. The next morning brought a new development. Detective Walsh called Denise directly. Mrs. Taylor, he said when she answered, his voice tense. We've arrested someone else for the Minimart robbery. A known offender who matches the description and was found with items linking him to the crime. I see, Denise said coolly. And my son's case? I've recommended to the DA's office that all charges be dropped immediately, Walsh said. I wanted to inform you personally. After she hung up, Denise relayed the news to Andre. That should be the end of the criminal case. The prosecutor will formally drop the charges at our next hearing. So it's over? Andre asked, hardly daring to believe it. The robbery case is over, Denise clarified. But the issue with Judge Harmon remains. If we still want to pursue that, we need to move quickly. Paul arrived an hour later with more documents. I've been in touch with 3 former defendants who were sent to Westbrook by Harmon. They're willing to talk, but they're scared. These are kids who've been through the system. They don't trust easily. What about the librarian and the security footage? Andre asked. That proves I couldn't have done the robbery. Doesn't that show Harmon was wrong to set such high bail? It shows he made a bad call in your case, and Paul explained. But to prove a pattern of corruption, we need more. Denise had been quiet, her attorney general face on, focused, calculating. What we need, she said finally, is to get Harmon himself to reveal the connection. How would we do that? Andre asked. We need someone he doesn't know is connected to the investigation to approach him, Denise said. Someone he might let his guard down around. Paul shook his head. That's risky. If he realizes he's being investigated, he could cover his tracks or worse. I'll do it, Andre said suddenly. Both adults turned to him in surprise. Think about it, Andre continued, warming to the idea. He's seen me once in court. He doesn't know I'm connected to the Attorney General. He just thinks I'm another kid he can push through the system. Absolutely not, Denise said firmly. It's too dangerous. Not physically dangerous, Andre argued. We'd just be talking. And where better than in the courthouse, where there are people everywhere. I could approach him after the hearing when they dismiss my case. Tell him I want to understand the system better or something. Paul looked thoughtful. It's not the worst idea. Harmon does have a reputation for lecturing young defendants. He likes to think of himself as a mentor. It's out of the question, Denise insisted. Andre is a minor. We're not sending him to confront a corrupt judge. I wouldn't be confronting him, Andre said. Just talking to him. Getting him to explain his thinking. He leaned forward. Mom, you've always said I have a gift for getting people to open up. It's why I'm good at debate. I know how to ask questions that make people reveal more than they intend to. Denise still looked unconvinced. What if we wire him? Paul suggested. Just a simple recording device. There would be court officers everywhere. Andre would never be alone with Harmon. Andre watched his mother's face, seeing the conflict there, her instinct to protect him battling with her respect for his autonomy and her commitment to justice. Let me try. Andre said softly. This isn't just about me anymore. After a long silence, Denise nodded reluctantly. We'll need to prepare carefully, and at the first sign of trouble, you walk away. Promise me. I promise, Andre said, relief and nervousness washing over him in equal measure. The next few days were spent in intense preparation. Andre, Denise, and Paul developed a strategy for approaching Judge Harmon after the hearing. They crafted questions designed to seem innocent, while potentially leading the judge to reveal his connection to Westbrook. Paul obtained a small recording device that could be hidden in Andre's jacket pocket. The night before the hearing, Andre could barely sleep. He kept running through the plan in his mind, imagining different scenarios, rehearsing his questions. This was bigger than his case now. It was about all the kids who had been sent to Westbrook, all the families who had suffered because of one judge's corruption. Morning came too quickly. Andre dressed carefully in the clothes his mother had suggested. Khakis and a button-down shirt, nothing that could be perceived as threatening or disrespectful. The recording device was safely hidden in his inner jacket pocket, small but powerful enough to capture conversations clearly. Remember, Denise said as they drove to the courthouse, the goal is just to get him talking about Westbrook. Don't accuse him of anything. Don't reveal what we know about the foundation. Just be curious. Andre nodded, his mouth too dry to speak. The courtroom was more crowded than last time. Their case was called first. As expected, the prosecutor requested all charges be dismissed, due to the arrest of another suspect and the conclusive evidence of Andre's presence at the library during the robbery. Judge Harmon looked annoyed as he granted the dismissal, his eyes barely flickering toward Andre. Case dismissed. Next matter. It was over in less than 2 minutes. Andre felt a wave of relief wash over him, but it was quickly replaced by nervousness about the next part of their plan. As people shuffled around for the next case, Andre glanced at his mother, who gave him a subtle nod. This was it. He slipped out of the spectator section and approached the side door that led to the judge's chambers. A court officer stopped him. "Can I help you?" "I was hoping to speak with Judge Harmon briefly," Andre said, summoning his debate team confidence. "My case was just dismissed and I had a question about the process." The officer looked skeptical but said, "Wait here," before disappearing through the door. Andre's heart pounded as he waited. What if Harmon refused to see him? What if he saw through their plan immediately? The door opened and the officer reappeared. "5 minutes," he said, holding the door for Andre. The judge's chambers were exactly as Andre had imagined. Wood-paneled walls, law books lining the shelves, certificates and photos displaying a lifetime in the legal system. Judge Harmon sat behind a massive desk, his robe still on, looking irritated at the interruption. "Make it quick," he said without preamble. "I have a full docket today." Andre swallowed hard, then launched into the speech he had practiced. "Thank you for seeing me, Your Honor. I wanted to apologize for taking up the court's time with my case." Harmon looked mildly surprised. "You're not here to complain about the bail amount?" "No, sir," Andre said. "I was actually wondering about what happens to kids who don't have their charges dismissed. I've been researching the juvenile justice system for a school project, and I came across Westbrook Academy. It seems like an interesting approach to rehabilitation." Something flickered in Harmon's eyes. Interest, perhaps, or wariness. "Westbrook is one of several facilities I consider when sentencing juveniles. They have an excellent program." "I read that," Andre said, heart racing but voice steady. "Their marketing materials mention a 90% success rate." "That seems really high." "They get results," Harmon said curtly. "Is that all?" "Almost," Andre said. "I just wondered how judges decide which kids go there. Is it based on the type of offense, or are there other factors?" Harmon's expression hardened slightly. "Judicial discretion is a complex matter, young man. Each case is unique." "Of course," Andre said quickly. "I was just curious because it seems like Westbrook gets a lot of first-time offenders from certain neighborhoods. Is that intentional or just coincidence?" The judge's eyes narrowed. "Who exactly put you up to these questions?" Andre felt a cold trickle of fear down his spine but kept his face neutral. "No one, sir. Like I said, it's for a school project, about disparities in the juvenile justice system." "I see." Harmon's voice had turned to ice. "Well, let me give you some free education then. The system works exactly as it should. Some communities produce more criminals. Some young men need stronger correction than others. Westbrook provides that correction and the community is safer as a result." He stood up. "Time's up." "Just one more question," Andre said, sensing the opportunity slipping away. "Does your role on the Fairview Foundation board give you any special insight into Westbrook's operations?" For a split second, shock registered on Harmon's face before his expression closed completely. "Who told you about that?" "Public records," Andre said. Which wasn't entirely a lie. The information was public, just deeply buried. "I was researching connections between the judicial system and private correctional facilities." Harmon came around the desk, looming over Andre. "Listen carefully. You're playing a dangerous game, boy. Your case is dismissed. Take the win and walk away." "Is it a conflict of interest?" Andre asked, emboldened by the reaction. "Sending kids to a facility that benefits from your foundation's investments?" "Get out!" Harmon snapped, reaching for the door. "Officer!" The court officer appeared immediately. "Problem, Your Honor?" "Escort this young man out," Harmon ordered. "He's finished here." As the officer led him away, Andre caught a final glimpse of Judge Harmon's face, flushed with anger, but underneath it, something that looked remarkably like fear. Andre's hands were shaking as he met his mother and Paul in the courthouse hallway. The court officer who had escorted him out gave him a curious look before returning to his post. "Are you okay?" Denise asked immediately, scanning his face for signs of distress. Andre nodded. "I'm fine, but I think I hit a nerve." They moved to a quiet corner away from the flow of people. Andre pulled the recording device from his pocket and handed it to Paul. "He practically kicked me out when I mentioned the Fairview Foundation," Andre said, his voice low but excited. "And he didn't deny the connection. He asked who told me about it." Paul slipped the device into his briefcase. "We'll need to review this carefully. If he made any admissions, even indirectly, what happens now? Andre asked. Denise checked her watch. Now you go to school. You've missed enough already. Paul and I will handle the next steps. Andre wanted to protest, but the look on his mother's face told him this wasn't negotiable. He'd done his part. Now it was time for the professionals to take over. Fine, he said reluctantly. But you'll tell me what's happening, right? No keeping me in the dark for my own good? I promise, Denise said, squeezing his shoulder. This is your fight too. We're in it together. School felt surreal after the intensity of the morning. Andre moved through his classes on autopilot, his mind replaying the conversation with Judge Harmon. Had he said enough? Had he pushed too far? Would the recording be clear enough to be useful? During lunch, his phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Recording is clear. Harmon made several revealing statements. Paul is putting together a file for formal investigation. A wave of relief washed over Andre. It hadn't been for nothing. After school, Andre hurried home, eager for details. He found his mother in the living room with Paul and a woman he didn't recognize, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a bun. Andre, this is Judge Beverly Washington, Denise said. She's the chief judge of the district court and Judge Harmon's supervisor. Andre shook her hand, suddenly self-conscious. This was moving faster than he'd expected. Your mother has shared some concerning information with me, Judge Washington said, her voice crisp but not unkind. I'd like to hear your account of the conversation with Judge Harmon this morning. Andre described the meeting in detail, trying to recall exact words and phrases. Judge Washington listened intently, occasionally making notes on a small pad. Did he explicitly acknowledge that his position with the Fairview Foundation influences his sentencing decisions? She asked when he'd finished. Not in those exact words, Andre admitted. But when I asked if it was a conflict of interest, he got angry and told me I was playing a dangerous game. He didn't deny it. Judge Washington nodded thoughtfully. The recording will be crucial. Judicial misconduct is a serious charge and we need solid evidence. Paul played the recording. Harmon's voice filled the room, clear enough that every word was audible. When they reached the part where Andre asked about the conflict of interest, Judge Washington's expression darkened. His response is, "Troubling," she said when the recording ended. Combined with the statistical analysis of his sentencing patterns and the financial connections you've documented, there's certainly cause for a formal investigation. What happens next? Andre asked. A Judicial Conduct Committee will review the evidence, Judge Washington explained. If they find probable cause, there will be a hearing. Judge Harmon will have the opportunity to respond to the allegations. And the kids who were sent to Westbrook? Andre pressed. What happens to them? Judge Washington's expression softened slightly. If misconduct is proven, their cases would be reviewed. Those still in custody could potentially be released or transferred, depending on the circumstances. How long will all this take? Denise asked. Weeks, possibly months, Judge Washington admitted. These proceedings are necessarily thorough. But, she added, looking directly at Andre, they are also necessarily confidential. Your name would be protected as a witness. Andre absorbed this information. Months of investigations, hearings, deliberations, all behind closed doors. It felt anticlimactic somehow after everything that had happened. What if... Andre began, then hesitated, looking at his mother. What if we made this public? Not just the Judicial Committee, but everyone, the media, the community. Denise frowned. Andre, that could complicate the official investigation, and it would definitely put you in the spotlight. I know, Andre said. But how many kids are sitting in Westbrook right now because of Harmon? How many families are struggling to pay bail they shouldn't have had to pay? While the committee does its thorough proceedings, more kids could be sent there. Judge Washington studied him with new interest. You understand that public attention could make this more difficult, not less? Judge Harmon has many allies in the system. He also has victims, Andre countered, and they deserve to know they're not alone, that someone is fighting for them. A silence fell over the room as the adults exchanged glances. Finally, Denise spoke. It would have to be done carefully, she said. We would need to protect the integrity of the investigation while still bringing the issues to light. Paul nodded slowly. I have contacts at the Tribune who might handle this responsibly. Focus on the pattern and the system, not just Harmon. Judge Washington sighed. I can't officially endorse this approach. But, she added, gathering her things. I can't prevent it either. Whatever you decide, I'll ensure the committee's investigation proceeds properly. She stood to leave. Andre, thank you for your courage in coming forward. It's not easy to stand up to authority, especially when that authority has wronged you. After she left, Andre, Denise, and Paul discussed their next steps. They decided on a two-pronged approach. Paul would work with his journalist contact to prepare a carefully researched story about the Harmon-Westbrook connection, while Denise would use her position as Attorney General to ensure the Judicial Committee's investigation remained rigorous and fair. What about me? Andre asked. What can I do now? Denise considered the question. The other kids who were sent to Westbrook, they might be willing to talk to you in a way they wouldn't talk to adults in the system. Your experience could help them open up. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Andre returned to his normal school routine, but his afternoons and weekends were consumed by the case. He met with 4 other teens who had been sentenced to Westbrook by Judge Harmon, all with stories similar to his own. First offenses, questionable evidence, harsh sentences. Working with Paul's journalist friend, a veteran reporter named Ray Chen, Andre helped compile these stories into a powerful narrative of systemic abuse. The teens were kept anonymous in the reporting, but their experiences, strikingly similar despite different circumstances, painted a damning picture. Meanwhile, Denise was working through official channels. The Judicial Conduct Committee had launched a formal investigation, and preliminary findings had triggered a broader audit of Harmon's cases. The judge had been temporarily reassigned to administrative duties pending the outcome. The Tribune published its exposé on a Sunday morning. By Monday, the story had been picked up by national news outlets. By Tuesday, 3 more judges across the state were being investigated for similar connections to private detention facilities. On Wednesday morning, Andre was eating breakfast when his mother came into the kitchen, phone in hand and a stunned expression on her face. The committee just called, she said. Judge Harmon resigned this morning. He's also resigned from the Fairview Foundation Board. Andre set down his spoon. Just like that? He's gone? Apparently he saw the writing on the wall, Denise said. The investigation was uncovering more than just the Westbrook connection. There were other conflicts of interest, other questionable patterns. So it's over? Andre asked, not quite believing it. This part is over, Denise corrected him. But there's still work to do. The kids in Westbrook, the system that allowed this to happen in the first place, those issues remain. Andre nodded, understanding what she meant. One corrupt judge had been removed, but the conditions that had allowed him to operate remained largely intact. A month later, Andre stood in the living room, straightening his tie as his mother looked on proudly. They were heading to a community meeting where teens and families affected by Judge Harmon's decisions would gather to share their stories and discuss next steps. Andre had been asked to speak about his experience. Nervous? Denise asked, adjusting his collar. A little, Andre admitted.
It's a lot of responsibility. You can handle it, she said with confidence.
You already have. As they drove to the community center, Andre thought about how much had changed in such a short time. 2 months ago, he had been just a student, focused on grades and college applications and debate team. Now he was part of something larger, a movement to reform a broken system. The community center was packed when they arrived. Families filled the rows of chairs, their faces a mix of hope and wariness. Many had suffered for years under judges like Harmon, seeing their children disappeared into a system designed to profit from their incarceration, rather than support their rehabilitation. When it was Andre's turn to speak, he approached the podium slowly, scanning the faces in the crowd. He saw pain there, but also strength and determination. My name is Andre Taylor, he began. 2 months ago, I was arrested for a crime I didn't commit and nearly became another victim of a corrupt judge. I was lucky. I had resources, support, and a mother who happens to be the Attorney General. A small ripple of surprised murmurs went through the crowd. Many hadn't known that detail. But justice shouldn't depend on luck or connections. It should be justice for all, not just for some. As he continued his speech, Andre caught his mother's eye in the front row. She nodded encouragingly, pride evident in her face. They had taken on a system much larger than themselves and made a difference. It wasn't a complete victory. The work was really just beginning, but it was a start. This isn't just about one judge or one detention center, Andre concluded. It's about building a system that sees our kids as people with potential, not as profit centers or problems to be locked away. It's about holding power accountable, especially when that power is abused. And most importantly, it's about standing together because there is strength in our shared stories and in our demand for change. The applause that followed wasn't just for him, Andre knew. It was for all of them. Everyone who had suffered injustice and refused to accept it as inevitable. Everyone who had found the courage to speak up, to push back, to demand better. As he stepped away from the podium, a younger boy, maybe 14, approached him. "Thank you," the boy said simply. "My brother's getting a new hearing because of what you did. He might come home." Andre nodded, momentarily too moved to speak. This was why it had all been worth it. Not for recognition or praise, but for the real lives that would be changed. As the meeting continued around him, Andre made a silent promise to himself. This wouldn't be the end of his involvement. The system needed changing, and he would be part of that change, today, tomorrow, and in the years to come.